And thank you, Steve, for recording once again. I appreciate that. My name is Justin Shanks, if you didn't gather that already. And as Marilyn indicated, I'm the Director of Learning Technologies for the College of Education, Health, and Human Development. And part of my role in that position is to do fun workshops like this, to work with faculty, staff, and students to better leverage some of the technological capabilities that we have in this great information age. Today, as hopefully you've picked up on, we're going to talk about Facebook. And yes, I am using the Beatles as a very kind reference. Largely because, well, Sgt. Pepper is a great album, but because it does reference this notion of friends, right? And Facebook, we all know that Facebook incorporates all sorts of different friends, this, friends, that. But that's really what the power of Facebook provides. If it didn't have that built-in network of relationships, it would just be another website, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to go through a couple of fun and useful things. But before we get too far, again, just want to send a thank you to the Center for Faculty Excellence for providing the hot chocolate and cookies and water. If you haven't already got some, please jump up and get that. And also broadening the audience a little bit. It's nice for me to be able to work with folks in the EHHD, obviously, but it's great to have the opportunity to work with folks outside EHHD. So in that regard, thank you for coming, and of course, thank you to the people who have provided me with my position, which is EHHD. So Facebook is a huge topic, right? And we could spend hours and hours and days talking about the implications that Facebook presents for higher education. But today, what I've done is I've created a couple of goals for us, and this should hopefully help us work our way through the discussion. And those, again, these are all big overarching goals, but what I would like to do today is talk about network communities, which provides a little bit of the background information. We'll touch on that quickly. Then we'll jump in. We'll talk about Facebook as a concept, as a platform. From the registration survey, I see that nearly 100% of people already use Facebook, so we won't have to spend any time talking about how to get you signed up, how to do this, how to do that. But if you have questions, of course, feel free to ask those. And then, of course, we'll talk about best practices for engaging Facebook for teaching, research, and or outreach. And then we'll have a little bit of playtime. We'll get to mess around in the Facebook sandbox and see what we can come up with, and more questions and answers, of course, will develop. So to accomplish those goals, our agenda today, a little bit more precise than those big overarching goals. We're going to talk about network communities, basically address what they are. We'll talk about why Facebook is important, again, in a very quick fashion, because this is a huge topic. And then ultimately what everybody's hoping to walk away with, I would imagine, is how do you use Facebook to connect with your students, research group participants, community members, whatever the case might be.
Oh,
Thanks,
sorry,
Kate.
I thought you had
That's okay.
enough.
So, first and foremost, what are network communities? Anybody ever heard this term previously? Anybody ever heard of a community before? Most hands hopefully go up. Bill, all right, thank
I
you.
know both of those words, I could guess.
Yeah.
You want to take a shot, Bill?
A bunch of people who are connected together.
I would think you're pretty close there, yeah. So a network community is, just as its name suggests, a group of people who are connected over a network, right? And the network in this case is not so much a physical network, which could be the case in some other instances, but we have the network of the World Wide Web, right? And Facebook is that platform for connecting those community members. And we really want to emphasize the notion of a network community, because again, as I mentioned just in a little intro, is that the true power of Facebook is leveraged by those relationships, by the fact that you, as a member of Facebook, are plugged into at least one, if not multitudes of communities in that platform. So today we're going to talk a lot about building those relationships, curating those relationships. So I want you to just come back to this notion of the network community. And if you get confused or forget what network community is, it's built on this platform of the Web 2.0. And I talked about this in the first Navigating New Media seminar in October, but the Web 2.0 is basically about community building. It's about interacting with information and other users and the content, and not just interacting in the sense that reading, digesting, but you're taking it, you're recreating it, you're sharing it with other people, you're commenting on it. But essentially the Web 2.0 has created that platform for you to engage with all sorts of different people, information, organizations, videos, texts, all sorts of other fun stuff. And this, I again used this in the previous Navigating New Media seminar, but I really like it because it does bring into the forefront all of these ideas that are so critical about why we're all interested in using Facebook for teaching or research or outreach. The fact that we can be creator and participant. It goes beyond our physical constraints that we have in classrooms or in research settings. All sorts of social, educational, so on and so forth. And there are a few of the really fun terms that I like coming up on the screen here. But the one that I am really fond of is over, as soon as all these circles get done here, is over in the, it'll be in the left-hand corner, I promise. It is right there. Thank you. Discussion and participation, right? That's what it comes down to. You're both sending information, receiving information, and you're engaging in a dialogue. If it's with your colleagues, if it's with your students, if it's with your research collaborators, research participants, community members, whatever the case might be, I want you to always come back to this notion of how am I engaging in a conversation? How am I creating a communicative environment for myself and these other community members? Because again, if you're just sending information, Facebook maybe isn't really the platform to do that. There are other avenues to send information one way, right? So we're focused on this communicative environment where we're creating a community dialogue, right? So, Bill, you want to take another shot? Networked learning. If we know what network community is, which is, again, those people who are connected via the network, what do we think networked learning might be?
Somebody put something out on that network and the rest of the people learn from it?
That's pretty close, yeah. I think that's it in a nutshell, yeah. So the idea with networked learning is, again, you have that communicative exchange of ideas, knowledge, information, but it's all undergirded by this notion of the relationship, right? Right now, we're not really having a networked learning environment quite yet because I'm standing and talking and people are listening actively, passively, depends on the individual, but in a networked learning environment, I would be providing information, someone would be commenting, critiquing, engaging with that information, they'd be learning from me, I'd be learning from them at the same time. So that's hopefully what we're going to get to later in the workshop, but this idea of the networked learning, again, is built on that notion of the relationship. And the best relationships, as we all know, are always two-way, right? People are giving and taking. It's always a reciprocal type of environment. So ultimately, though, that doesn't begin with Facebook, right? It doesn't begin even with the internet. It goes back, has a long, long history, this notion of engaging in a relationship of communicative, reciprocal learning. One of my favorite scholars in that vein is Ivan Illich, who is a 20th century philosopher of education and technology. So he obviously has a lot to say that's pertinent to us, but I pulled just a couple of nuggets out of one of his more memorable books, which is called Deschooling Society, which we could talk at great length about later if you like. But a couple of things just to focus in on, and he differentiates the notion between schooling and learning, education and learning, teaching and learning. So he's very nuanced in his approach. I don't think he wants to get rid of schools entirely or teachers are going to go away or anything like that. But he really stresses this notion of the reciprocal relationship that's involved in learning and engaging with information. And a couple of the key things, the top one I think is most pertinent to us, this notion that technology is available to develop either independence in learning or bureaucracy in teaching. There's nothing that people like less than bureaucracy, of course, but teaching is sort of fraught in there, right? Because a lot of us in this room are teachers, and it's kind of complicated to think, okay, well, we want to get rid of teaching with technology, but the way Illich was engaging with that in the 60s and 70s is a little bit different than our discussion now, and it's this idea that teaching would be that sage on the stage, that pedagogue, right? That person who would just stand and deliver, not help guide people through the vast, sea of knowledge that is presented before them in a textbook, in an article, let alone the internet, right? So it's this idea that we want to use the technology to foster this independent but yet reciprocal communicative learning environment. So again, just some keystones that come back to later, and we can always refer back to Ivan here later. But moving right along, key concepts. I feel like I'm really drumming this home, but this is really stuff that undergirds all of the best practices. So this is distilled down from 10 years of research from folks who've been interested in online collaborative reciprocal learning environments, and it's really come to an easy low risk, low barriers to entry environment in Facebook, right? And Facebook, as we all know, allows users to like things, right? They can share things, they can comment on things, but it does more than that too. It allows them to create information, remix information, but ultimately it extends our point of contact, right? So if we're teaching in a physical classroom, Facebook gives us an out-of-classroom environment to engage with our students, right? If we're doing a research project that's somewhere far afield in Troy, Montana, if we're based in Bozeman, we still have the capability to engage with those folks, even though we don't want to make that drive, obviously, every day, right? And if we're working with community members, be it in Gallatin Valley, or if they're community members in a different state or a different part of the world, we have that easy avenue to engage with them and allow for dynamic, interactive content, delivery, reception, so on and so forth. So again, the stuff in pink is the really sort of, don't forget that, right? Because it's about communication, it's about engagement with those folks. But after our quick little primer there in social media literacy, the ultimate question, right? How do you use Facebook? Raise your hand if you currently have a Facebook page, profile. Right, again, so look around. Everybody's in the same boat, right? They have Facebook, but we're wondering, how do we do things better? How do we do things differently with respect to our teaching, research, and or outreach? Facebook says that Facebook allows people to stay connected, right? Friends, family, discover what's going on in the world, and share and express what matters to them, right? That's great corporate rhetoric, right? Makes you feel real warm and fuzzy about Facebook. And it does do a lot of those things, but it doesn't do those things on its own, right? So we have to understand, how do we make these things happen? They don't just, well, I created a Facebook page for my course, or I created a Facebook group for my research endeavor. Now, community build, right? It doesn't happen quite that easily. Even though the mission of Facebook is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected, it doesn't automatically become open and connected unless you facilitate those connections within the community and outside the community. So we can accomplish those things in a number of different ways, but it comes down to two really important concepts, right? Know thyself, which I was just watching The Matrix, and this is very depressing, right? But you have to understand, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with Facebook? Is Facebook the right venue, the right platform for you to accomplish those things? Yes? No? That's a question that you want to answer in the primacy of this endeavor, right? And then how do you already use Facebook? What things are you familiar with? What things maybe could you enrich and do a little bit better? What practices might you need to change? So on and so forth. And then of course, because this is a relationship building endeavor, you need to understand your participants, right? What do they expect from their engagement with Facebook, either in a social endeavor, in an academic endeavor, in a business, research endeavor? All of those different realms may have different questions, but you need to understand, what do they want from it? How do they currently use it? Where do they engage with it? Do they have a mobile device they're using? Are they using a laptop? Are they using a desktop? What's their internet accessibility like? All those things will play into how effective your Facebook communication is going to be, how effective your community building is going to be via Facebook, right? And then, of course, understanding your participants and cultural nuance, and are you working with folks from diverse cultural or socioeconomic backgrounds? You need to understand all those things so you can effectively communicate, right? Which is not specific to Facebook, obviously. Those are things you should keep in mind anytime. And community building via Facebook is going to come down to three key concepts. And again, these are distilled, and they contain a lot of nuance in them, so we can unpack these more later. But this notion of content sharing, you're going to provide content either that you're creating yourself or you're finding from elsewhere and sharing it via the Facebook group, page, profile, whatever the case might be. Knowledge creation, right? Yourself, your participants, your colleagues, your collaborators, your community members are going to take that content and create knowledge from it, right? Content, knowledge, subtly different, at least subtly different. But taking that information and doing something with it, right? Giving it meaning and viewing it with some sense of why, purpose, right? And then relationship enhancement. And that's, again, what Facebook is going to allow us to do. We can, of course, share content and create knowledge, but Facebook provides a unique platform where we can really enhance that via that communicative, reciprocal relationship building process, right? So, that's a lot of talking. I apologize for that, but a little bit of background will now allow us to play around a little bit. So, So, how might you use Facebook for research, teaching, outreach? And I know a number of you in the room are already engaging in Facebook for these purposes via groups or via specific Facebook pages for different endeavors on campus or throughout the state or elsewhere. And we're going to leverage that knowledge, that information in a little bit when we get into sort of our discussion mode. But I assume that these are the questions that drove you to attend. But if you have other questions regarding how might you engage with Facebook, certainly feel free to bring those up as we're jumping into stuff. So, who wants to venture a guess at the difference between Facebook pages and Facebook groups? I know, like I said, a number of you have groups or you have pages, but anybody want to give us the penny's worth of explanation of what the subtle difference is?
I think in the groups, then you get notified when somebody posts something, whereas a page, it just has to show up in your news feed, right? Isn't that the?
Yeah,
That's all only
that's
difference
certainly
I know.
one difference. Yeah. Yeah. So the group is going to send you information, right? Send you a notification when new content or new comments or whatever has been posted. Whereas the page, you have to. It'll still come to you, but you have to seek it out in your news feed, right?
Yeah.
That's one very important distinction.
So can't the group be a closed group to where it's only the participants of the group that are in the group that know what's going on in the group?
Yeah, that's restricted access.
Yeah,
Yeah,
restricted.
definitely, yeah. Whereas the page is primarily going to be public. Otherwise, it would be sort of interesting to have a page and not want people to look at it. But any other info?
The groups seem more interactive, so the participants can actually post things and share information, where in pages, I think you can post things as an outside person, but they're usually not as conversational.
Yeah, those are all very excellent components. And again, we'll go with the nice explanation from Facebook themselves, but all three of those issues that were brought up are very pressing, right? It's the level of engagement that you as a community member, as a follower, as a participant can engage with those different communities, those different venues for interacting, right? And it's this notion that pages, according to Facebook, are designed to create a closer relationship with an audience and customers, right? Whereas groups are designed for sharing with people who care about whatever the concept or topic might be as much as possible, right? So right there, from the very foundation of what these things are created for, we have a very different focus on what they're about, right? Facebook continues to say that pages allow broad, sort of sweeping communication, right? You're not really targeting particular people. You're saying, hey, this latest, greatest running jacket will make you faster, right? Whereas groups allow you to communicate about shared interests. So if you're the designer for a running jacket company, right? You want to engage with your fellow running jacket designers or your potential people who are going to be using these things in more of a sharing and engaging in a conversation about the topic. But ultimately, and I think Aubrey really sort of honed in on this, is that pages are about broadcasting, whereas groups are about collaborating, right? So the page is, hey, here's a page about my organization, my institution, my course, my latest and greatest book. Whereas the group is, here's our group about this course, about this topic, about this research endeavor, about whatever the case might be. Question?
So what if you kind of want to do both? I have a page that is meant for broadcasting, but we would also like people to collaborate on it. And it's a little bit difficult because of the way a page is set up. Any advice?
Yes and no. So I think ultimately, so there's a lot of different ways to approach this stuff, right? And earlier in the talk, or I guess it's not really a talk yet, it's more my talk, I mentioned that you need to determine whether or not Facebook is the venue, is the avenue, right? And for teaching, research, outreach, the pages and the groups have tons of potential. However, they do have limitations, right? Because the page is really about, hey, here's information. If you want to interact, you can, but it's going to be restricted to basically commenting on posts that the page administrator creates, right? You can have more interactive information in the group, right? You can still broadcast information, but group members also have the opportunity to broadcast information or engage in that conversation. So I don't think it hurts to have both. It certainly, they're going to have different approaches, different intentions, but you need to determine what's the information, what's the content that I want to share, and what degree of collaboration am I seeking, and who do I want to open this up to, or do I want to make it a closed, restricted access group, or even a secret group where no one can see it unless you invite them, right? So all those things have different capabilities, but they also have different drawbacks as well. So, and we're going to do a little show and tell, and talk about the difference between pages and groups in a second. But what I want to do, we're going to skip through Facebook page creation right now. We're going to do a little bit more of the internet fun stuff. All right, so if you supplied Facebook information when you registered, I invited you to join a Facebook group that I created for this session. If you didn't, don't worry about it, we'll get you in there later. But what I want to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about this group, and we're going to talk about what's good about it, maybe what doesn't work about it, as soon as the internet wants to catch up with what I want to do. And then we're going to explore a little bit of other fun stuff, and then ultimately you're going to create some stuff. So, we have okay, so here is an example of a Facebook group, right? And as I said, 13 people, 12, 13 including myself, are now members of this group, right? And the purpose of this group, the description of this group, is basically what the workshop is about, right? We're going to talk about possibilities for Facebook in higher education, and it is designed as a closed group, right? Facebook has 3 levels of group access. It's open, where anyone who's interested can join. Closed, where it's visible to anyone on Facebook, but access is restricted based upon administrator consent. And then secret, where you can't see the group unless the administrator invites you to see it, right? And there's obviously pros and cons for each restricted, or each access restriction. It depends, of course, what you're trying to accomplish. I elected to go with a closed group on this one because, at least for the time being, it keeps it restricted to people who are participating in the workshop, or at the very least might be interested in Facebook as a pedagogical research or outreach tool, and then we can invite them and give them access. But what types of things would you expect to see in a group about the possibilities of Facebook in higher education?
That's why I'm here to find out.
No. Excellent. So okay, let's take it to the step back. What do you see on the screen about different options that you could engage with if you were or currently are a member of this group?
You could ask a question.
You could ask a question, yeah.
Post stuff.
You could post stuff, right? So you could
Found
post,
online.
yeah, you could post information, certainly. So you would content share, right?
Post events.
You could post events, right?
Photos.
Photos, yes, another form of content sharing, which is a little more visually stimulating than text, right? So we see up here at the, and I have done nothing fancy with this. This is basically create a group, presto changeo, put a picture in, you're ready to go. But it's all fairly straightforward. So I present this as a very rough, simple sample for you to think about. Okay, what if I wanted to create a group for my course about medieval literature? Or what if I wanted to create a group for participants in a research study? Or what if I wanted to create a group to better interact with community members regarding whatever topic might be? So we have a very simple, straightforward layout, right? And that's one of the advantages to Facebook, which you can read more about on the handout that I forgot to pass out earlier. It's very easy to navigate, right? If you're using Facebook for any type of social purposes, moving into the group or page platform is going to be remarkably similar to anything you've seen if you're just reading information from a friend or an organization that you follow, whatever the case might be. But we have Lindsay Jackson posted a photo, all right. So we have the content coming down this middle page right here, right? The middle of the page, and then over on the side we have more of the administrative and then Facebook advertising, all that kind of fun stuff. But as we can see, as Lindsay just posted, any group member has the capability of posting content, right? So I posted a few things earlier. Lindsay has now just posted a very nice interactive photo of the presentation. But so now all of the community members have the opportunity, say, to engage in a critique of Lindsay's photographic skill, or they can talk about. I posted a collection of conference proceedings regarding higher education, technology, pedagogy, right? So that information is accessible to any group members because it's closed. Obviously, people outside the group don't have access to it. But what we can see is we've already got a little bit of community building going on because Bill is liking this. Other people are engaging with it. We have new community members seeking to join, but what we have, and this is all fantastic, right? This is what I had hoped for. Thank you for doing this. So it is a little intense, but you get to moderate it, right? So you don't have to obviously sit at your computer and see this stuff as it happens, because you get these nice little red boxes that pop up to let you know. But you could, say for example, if you're holding virtual office hours, right? We're going to do it on the Facebook group. Let's talk about this particular section of my medieval literature text that we're reading. Or if you're research participants and you're filling out your post-participation survey, I'll be available on Facebook if you have questions, or if you have questions of your other colleagues or students, feel free to ask those to the group, right? Because what we want is, we don't want just one person, i.e. the administrator, me, standing up here telling you all about Facebook. We want the group, right, this community that we're creating, to become co-participatory experts in the possibilities of Facebook for higher education, right? Obviously, I know some stuff about Facebook in higher education. Other people in the room know other stuff about Facebook in higher education. So what we want to do is we want to leverage that collective knowledge, right? We want people to be able to engage in a conversation, pose questions of each other, present information, post pictures, provide information about those photos, right? We want that sort of community building to happen. And it certainly happens in a physical sense all the time, or hopefully all the time in higher education, but Facebook presents us another avenue to engage in those conversations. Not only does it enable community building during the semester, during the research participation, or during the research study, or during the outreach project, but it also creates this, what I like to call the never-ending story, right? It creates this longitudinal, if you want to use a nice scientific research term, it creates this community that really doesn't have any boundaries, right? It doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't have a, best before date. It doesn't have a, hey, we're going to be in room 314 for an hour talking about Facebook. After that, good luck and Godspeed. Assuming that Facebook doesn't go anywhere soon, which doesn't seem like that's going to happen, this information is going to be available to group members ad infinitum, right? So if you're sort of interested in Facebook as a pedagogical research or outreach tool right now, that's fine. 5 years from now, when you're like, you know what? I would really like to leverage Facebook to better engage X, Y, and Z. That information is still available to you. And you have this lovely digital archive, right? And this group has been going for less than 12 hours. You have a lovely digital archive that will run you through everything that's happened in the group. So you can pull in photos, files, comments, questions, best practices, whatever the case might be, as you need it, right? And that's one of the great things, because not everyone is going to have the same questions at the same time, but those questions might creep up later. You might not be teaching this semester or this year. Maybe next year you want to know more about, okay, what did Justin say was a really good practice that he saw from Bailey and this and that? It's all there for you, right? That's one of the great things that allows that continuity of the community, right? Does that all make sense? I don't want to focus on this too much, but there are tons of capabilities, and we don't want to dwell too much on this one example. I want to focus on some other best practices. But any questions, comments, concerns before we step on? Yeah.
I would just say one thing that I hear students complain about D2L is that after the semester's over, it's gone. And they can't go back and look at discussions or look at the material. I guess the challenge to me so that would be a real plus for this. The challenge would be though is after the course is over, as a teacher, and I had things on Facebook as compared to D2L, would I then be in a situation where I felt like I had to be attentive to the Facebook page of my course forever and ever?
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. You raise a good point. And again, with D2L, there are pros and cons. With Facebook, there are pros and cons. With Twitter, with MOOCs, with blogs. I mean, all of these different things have different benefits and different consequences that we need to be aware of when we decide to engage with them. The ongoing continuity certainly can pose some alterations to your pedagogical approach or to your research agenda or to whatever the case might be. But I think in most instances, the benefits outweigh the consequences, right? So, for example, if you used Facebook to moderate out-of-class discussion, right, for a course about Chaucer, right, that you teach maybe every 2 years, whatever the case might be. This semester, we engage with it heavily. It sort of sits dormant, maybe a little bit of activity. When you come up to teach that Chaucer course again in 2 years' time, you don't have to necessarily create a new Facebook group, right? You can, of course. You can create the fall 2016 Chaucer group, and you can have a 2014 Chaucer group. But you can also have just a Chaucer group, right? So the benefit to that is the students in 2016 benefit from all of the questions, thoughtful critique, engaging dialogue that the 2014 group had. Of course, you don't want to say, here's the essay topic from 2014, I'm going to have you write an essay on the same thing in 2016. It requires a little bit of rethinking what you're doing educationally, research-wise, outreach-wise. You don't obviously want to just duplicate things time and again. But again, you're creating that vast community, right? So maybe 3 out of the 15 people enrolled in that course are English majors. Maybe one of those is going to go on to study Chaucer as a PhD student, right? But if that one student happens every 2 years, you have an ongoing community for that smaller but still growing community of Chaucer scholars to continue to engage in these conversations. So in that way, Marilyn or anyone else who would be interested in engaging in this for course purposes, it does require a little bit of upkeep, but it doesn't require quite as much upkeep, because if you do engage with it as just an ongoing, rather than section-specific or term-specific community, you end up with, say, if you do have 15 students in a Chaucer course, which would be fantastic, every 2 years, so you have 30 students in 2 years' time, 60 students in 4 years' time, right? And the great thing about that is you don't have to be the only teacher, right? You don't have to be the only educator. You don't have to be the only expert, because if you do have one person going on to a PhD or 2 people going on to a master's, or just people who are undergraduate enthusiasts of Chaucer, they have that opportunity to become co-creators of that knowledge, right? They self-moderate, they self-direct that learning. If one person is really interested in Canterbury Tales and one person is really interested in Troilus and Cressida, they can engage in those different conversations, and they can create their own sort of breakout groups, right? Or they can contain that information in one group, which then allows them to become that community of learners, right? So that's one of the biggest pedagogical shifts that people have, perhaps a slight stumble with, I guess is maybe a good way to put it, is you move from that, again, I'll use myself as an example in this case, me standing up here telling you the way it could or should or might be, to a situation where we're all sitting, in sort of a big round circle discussion area where I know this little bit, I have a question about this, you might know that little bit, you have a question about that. So it becomes more of a dialogue, more of a conversation rather than a speech or talking to or whatever the case might be. Yes?
Question, if you're using D2L, and I actually teach online and face-to-face, so I use D2L a lot. I don't use Facebook at all right now because I think I already have a lot of requirements for my students. Is it asking them too much to, we have discussion in D2L, which is, you have to answer these questions, you can't see what other people are saying until you answer it. Then I could potentially see this great benefit of saying, oh, and in Facebook, we have this open discussion that's continuing semester by semester. But by requiring students or asking them to do something else, is it too confusing for some students? I have a lot of students that aren't great at technology, and I don't want to confuse them more.
Yeah, very important points. And that goes back to the know thyself and know thy participants, right? And so know thyself, not only what's your familiarity and comfort level with Facebook, but what are you expecting of your students elsewhere, right? Because Facebook, as much as they want you to believe, is not sort of the pinnacle of the internet or of community building or information exchange, right? It's great for a lot of reasons, but you certainly don't want to make it just another thing that your students are asked to do, right? So if you feel as though you're already requiring a lot of your students, maybe Facebook's not good in addition to that. Perhaps Facebook would be good in place of something. D2L has a discussion board form option, right? And it has a lot of other options that are duplicated in Facebook, right? Or rather, they duplicate a lot of features which are found in Facebook. I think we should flip that around. But perhaps if, instead of having them do discussion in D2L, you transition that to Facebook. Or if you say, hey, I'd really like people to create a shared resource library. So rather than doing that in a one shared D2L folder, we're going to do that in Facebook. There are a number of case studies instances where people have just put the LMS aside and decided to go solely with Facebook. And that's been enriched over the last couple of years because they now have file sharing and you have very large capacities with which you can upload, download content. So there are potential, there is the potential to make Facebook your LMS. Of course, there's going to be all sorts of other baggage with that in terms of privacy concerns and institutional requirements and this and that. But it does allow you to do a lot of the same stuff as D2L or Blackboard or Sakai or whatever your LMS might be. But ultimately, I think that's a decision that you want to make maybe by yourself or perhaps in conjunction with your students and understand what their familiarity is with Facebook, understand, do we think this is probably or possibly more beneficial than D2L, what are the limitations? So it's, again, we want to create that communicative environment where you don't just say, we're going to do this in Facebook because we have Facebook, right? We want to, have the students have some buy-in because ultimately they're going to be engaging with it a ton, right? So we want to know, is this something you feel comfortable with, familiar with, and that's a little bit think on the fly, right? First week of the semester, engaging in the conversation, but I think it's things like discussion boards aren't easy enough to transition to a Facebook group, during, the first 5 days of class. But certainly you can, go, sort of all in, so to speak, and say, this semester we're going to try, as an experiment, to use Facebook as our LMS, and sink or swim, we'll have feedback at the end of the term. Yes?
I'm curious if there's anybody in here that's using Facebook in one of their classes.
I can just say, our department is starting to talk about Facebook, not for a class, but we have a problem that we need to follow our graduates. We're being required by our accreditation folks to say, what happened to your graduates a year, 2 years, 3 years after you graduated? We're looking at the possibility of creating a Facebook account that will do that, which has me wondering, when you create a group, if the person who created the group retires, is there a way to hand that group off to another person, or do you need to create an account for the department?
So, yes and no. So again, there are those 3 levels of access. There's the open group where anyone can join if they're interested in the Department of Education at Montana State. There's a closed group where anybody can see that group exists. But if they want to read the posts or participate in the group, they need to be given access. Or there's the secret group where you can't see it unless Bill invites you to see it, right? So you can certainly start with one administrator. You can add other administrators to the group after the fact. So you could have, a host of sort of your administrative team, and that could be transitioned as people, retire, move to other institutions, whatever the case might be. And again, it can easily become self-moderated, so it doesn't have to be something that you are doing or someone else in the administrative offices for the department are doing. You could appoint, a cycling chair person who's in charge of alumni relations for the department or wherever the case might be, and keep track and engage with those folks. And that's all featured in the drop-down menu here, where you have manage your group and you can adjust all the administrator settings and who has access to what, so on and so forth. Other questions? Otherwise, I want to
You
we'll get
mentioned privacy concerns and institutional, what's the second word, requirements?
requirements, yeah,
So what are the institutional requirements? Do you know?
regarding.
Regarding Facebook and MSU faculty?
I don't think there's any institutional requirement regarding Facebook. There are sometimes, I don't think MSU has one, but there are sometimes institutional requirements regarding LMS use. Some institutions are really strict about you have to use the LMS to some extent. But I'm not familiar with any restrictions at MSU regarding Facebook access, privacy, email, interactions, anything like that.
You're right, I don't think we have it, unless they're departmental requirements that people disagree with.
And that's obviously, before you go all in, that would be something to talk with maybe web and digital communications about.
I do think you're required to use D2L for online courses.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and let me back up. Of course, you don't want to be exchanging any private information. Student grades, obviously, the LMS is the way to convey student grades. Obviously, you shouldn't be exchanging any sensitive social security, student ID. None of that stuff should be going here. Just be real clear about that. Grading, of course, I believe the institutional requirement at any institution I've ever looked at is to go through the LMS and the LMS alone, which feeds into Banner and so on and so forth. Katie, do you have a question?
Well, I wondered, I only have like one Facebook page for my personal, and if you're gonna do this, should you create a professional one?
And that's a very good question. So you can create different personas, like you could use your Montana email address to create your sort of Katie Bark Team Nutrition
Okay.
profile, and then you can use that. Do you do the Team Nutrition page?
We
Is that-
can't, because we're funded by OPI and only the superintendent.
Oh,
She doesn't want to
okay.
open that up,
Okay,
so we can't do it.
okay.
So we've used it maybe through our nonprofit coalitions.
Okay.
We'll send stuff to them, but I guess, I just didn't know if you joined, I didn't even know about groups till today, so thank you.
Cool.
If I start joining them professionally, should I have my own professional one?
And, there are a couple of different ways to approach that. It depends what level of privacy you're seeking as a professional versus a personal entity, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not worried about potentially your public or your personal information becoming public, like photos and status updates, that kind of stuff, then there's no need to worry about different accounts. If you really want a distinct personal versus private persona, or personal versus professional, persona, then yeah, of course you can create as different accounts
So
as you
if
want.
I join a
However,
group, does everybody see, if I just asked to join?
so
Everybody will see really now, and if I post something to my page?
people will see it in the group for sure. If you're not friends with them, it won't show up in their news feed.
Oh, okay.
However, there's a little thing on page 3. It's called "Why Can't We Be Friends?" I was in a music tape when I made this handout, which talks about restricting who sees what. So there's a option to create lists, which are on here somewhere. But ultimately, so you have all these, and Facebook now auto creates all these different lists for you based upon where your friends live or work or all that kind of stuff. But what you can do after you create a list, or just use a list that Facebook has created for you, you go to your privacy settings, and then you can see your future posts. And again, don't worry about keeping up with all this. There's step-by-step instructions on my website, so it'll walk you through all this stuff. But if you click on who can see your future posts, the default is public. But if you click on this more options, there's then the custom option, which allows you to then go in and say, hey, if you're a member of the With a Little Help from My Friends Facebook group, but you don't want those people to see any of your posts as a Katie Bark person, not Katie Bark professional, you just type in that list, and then all of a sudden, they don't see that stuff. Or if you have if you're using it predominantly as a person and not as a professional, and you don't want your stuff to mix and match, you can put particular people in there you don't want to see posts. Or if you create a list that's Montana State and you don't want your colleagues to see any of the personal stuff you're posting, you just put that in there and they don't see it. So there are a lot of different iterations of how you can restrict access to your information. And of course, you can just, if you don't want to go through the whole custom rigmarole, you can just say, only my friends can see my stuff, or only I can see my stuff. But again, really the true power of Facebook is about community building. So rather than, I think, restricting access to who sees what, I think you self-discipline what you post on Facebook, right? If it's something that maybe, and I say with this in all seriousness, you need to be aware of your digital footprint, right? And if it's something that you think might potentially, possibly in the smallest sense, come back to sort of nip you later, just leave it out, right? There are all sorts of great private ways to share information. There's email, there are letters, there's face-to-face contact, right? If it's something that's sensitive and you don't want the entire internet to see, don't post it. And again, you can build more relationships, more reciprocal relationships if you're not sort of governing what different groups can see. That said, you have, of course, all these options and you can make your own decisions since you're all growing up.
Thank you.
So, who wants to look at some other examples and do a little workshop critique? Am I the only one? All right.
Sounds like fun.
Sounds like fun, right? So, we'll ease into this. We won't start with the groups that people manage currently in the session. Let's talk about Edutopia. Seems like something that people might be interested in. So, Edutopia, well, first of all, is this a page or a group? A page. Now, how do you know it's a page?
Try something on this page.
All right, well, that would be a good guess. But you can also, if you look at it, you can tell that there's a distinct, different layout, right? So it's, where am I posting my own stuff? Well, a little bit there, but you're mostly interacting and commenting on stuff, right? You don't have the same options in terms of, well, you can click on photos, but you can't necessarily add a photo depending on the group settings. But Edutopia has created a page, right? And as we can see from the subheadings, it's about educational research and educational organization, right? Pros, cons, feedback, what do we think we would like to see from this page that maybe we don't see? So they've got a little bit of social media integration over here with their Instagram and Pinterest accounts, Twitter as well.
You don't have ask a question or add a file or anything.
Yeah, so again, remember the page is broadcasting information, right? So Edutopia is basically, hey, here's our top 5 must-dos for vocabulary instruction, which is probably super helpful, but if you want to engage in a conversation about that, you're hierarchically being put underneath that initial information, right? You can't necessarily engage in a, hey, here's what I think about this in a more dynamic, collaborative, conversational way. Again, they've got some examples of other stuff going on. I didn't notice we were running so short on time. Let's zip to another one real quick. Let's try this one. This is a huge one. Page or group? Group, obviously you can see lead group at the top there, but again, what do you notice that's different between this and the previous page?
It's more invitational. It's write, add, ask, add. You can do stuff with it.
Yeah, verbs, right? Yeah. It gets the participant, the community member more engaged in the creation and the sharing and the critiquing and the remixing of that content, right? And also, we can see that, what do we have up here? We have profile pictures of the different members, right? We can see, we get the pertinent information, closed groups. This is sort of a good thing to think about anytime you create a group is ground rules are always probably a good idea. If you don't put in the don't advertise, what you get is people trying to sell stuff or books or whatever the case might be. But we can see that the content is inherently different too. We don't have the, hey, here's my organization's information. Yusri Arshad wants to have an answer to a question, right? Or Nen here has a question about colloquiums specifically. This is social media at its finest, the viral content making its way.
Hey, can you share that with me?
I certainly can. Or if you're interested in qualitative research, you
Just
can also
put
join
it on the group page.
If you haven't seen it already, I'm sure you will by the end of the day on one of your friends' news feeds. And then, introduction, I want to know more about this group, what's going on, so on and so forth. So again, it's more of that conversational information. And certainly, if you scroll down, you're going to find the white paper, or here's an article that you want to read, or here's a website to check out for people who are interested in qualitative research. But that content is more give and take, to and fro.
Do you know how to, on pages or groups, I noticed that there's like suggested groups or suggested posts on the right-hand side. Can you control that, or is that something Facebook decides to do? I mean,
You
how do you
can-
network with other communities that are like-minded?
So the best way to control what shows up in your suggested friends or suggested groups is to like things or become members of other groups, because that's the algorithm works. The Facebook algorithm works in the way of, hey, she likes X, Y, and Z, so she'll probably like, A, B, and C. And same thing with groups. If you're, belonging to groups that are all about science, you're going to get other scientific groups,
So
or
there's
in a
no
particular
way you can
region.
control it.
Well,
I
there's
mean, besides
the
liking.
best. Yeah, and sometimes that stuff like manger, I've never heard of the restaurant. I'm not interested in it.
Yeah.
But if you want to find other groups or other pages or whatever, just type it into the search bar, just like you were going to search for a friend, and then you have all of these different options. But the best is, in my experience, is always just click more results, and then you can filter those groups by, am I looking for people connected to qualitative research, or pages, or groups, and then you can go through and you get the little summary of what the group or the page or the person is about, join, like, follow, all those kind of options. So, the search bar works just like a Google search bar, right?
Yeah.
Here are the keywords, see what pops up.
Yeah.
But that's also something you want to keep in mind if you are creating a page or a group for teaching, research, outreach, is how are people going to find my group? Is it something where I'm going to invite everyone, which can become kind of laborious, right? If you're in a, teaching an introductory chemistry section of 400 people, you want people to go and find it and add themselves. Or, maybe you nominate your TA to be the administrator and they're the one who's doing all that. I mean, that's laborious work. Somebody has to do it. But it's usually easier if people can search the group out, search out the page, and ask to follow or ask to become a community member.
Okay.
So there's all sorts of different dynamics to think about. But yeah, don't forget about the power of the search bar in Facebook or outside of Facebook. It's your best friend. Wow, so we're running. Discussion was awesome. Couple of things. I just want to draw your attention again. If you didn't get a handout, make sure you get one before you leave. There's some really, I think, important things to consider regarding pages, groups, the benefits of using groups or pages, and how that helps create, that never-ending, deep learning environment for teaching, research, or outreach. But the back page is the top things to think about whenever using social media and or any technology in higher education. Those are just important things to keep in your mind anytime basically you're operating in higher education. And then there's also the help section, which has my contact info, but then also a couple of websites or articles that I think are particularly relevant to Facebook and higher ed. And then this presentation and the little bit we didn't get to see in the end of the slideshow will be up on the EHHD Learning Technologies website next week-ish, as well as a recording. So if you missed out on anything we talked about today or forgot what your question was, you'll be able to watch that in all its infamy for time immemorial. And then there are, again, step-by-step instructions for creating a page, for creating a group, also will be up on the website. And certainly if you have other questions, comments, concerns, problems, curiosities, email me, call me. Office is just sort of diagonal from here. We're in 305. So any last-minute questions to sneak in under the wire, comments, issues, anything pressing that we should cover real quick? Allison?
Is there any way to delete stuff?
So deleting stuff from the internet is a fraught concept. So yes, you can delete it, but it never goes away because the internet is very good at archiving itself. So you can delete stuff. You can, sometimes it's called archive in Facebook language, where you can archive a list or archive a group where basically no one can see it unless they're already a member of it. Other things you can delete, and usually the easiest and fastest way to access that kind of stuff is to click this little drop-down menu, and so if it's a page, click Manage Page, and then you'll get in and you'll see these other options. So the option from here is remove from favorites, but let's say if I wanted to delete this page, come over here, and it's in here somewhere.
Spend some time looking through
Settings, maybe? Yeah, here we go. Remove page. So you can delete it, but again, anything you had previously posted up there is going to be, people don't usually try to seek it out, but they can.
Students create stuff, and then they disappear, and if it's linked to your program, it's confusing when you,
Yeah.
so I don't know how to control that.
Yeah, so, okay, real quick. You have to become sort of an archivist, right? You have to become a curator of the information. So you have to understand what are the practices, what are the practices you feel comfortable with keeping that information current. If it's not current or has dead links, you delete it. I mean, it never really goes away, but at least it's not visible. So when people are searching for things, they're less likely to find it. But again, that's a practice that is, in addition to teaching, in addition to research, in addition to outreach, you have to become a good information curator. And I'm very happy to talk more at length about that, because the practices are different for different platforms, but the general concepts are, you want the most current information, most easily accessible. And as information becomes outdated, you either delete it, replace it, fix it, whatever the case might be. But yeah.
So even if you replace information, it's still there too?
Oh, it's there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, so the information always lives in the the archive of the World Wide Web. But if you say I have an article that the link no longer works for, if you repair that link on your page or group or website, whatever the case might be, it will then direct to the appropriate link. If the journal is completely dissolved and it's no longer even a thing, then you want to, of course, remove it. If someone were to go search through the archives of the website, they could find that. But if what's visible on the live page is accurate and current, then they're less likely to even know the other stuff exists, unless they're really sleuthing around the internet for some dead link. So, yeah.
Thank you, Justin. That
Yeah,
was-
thank you, everybody, for coming.